Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. All right, we're here with Steve Saideman from Carleton University, and it's the NATO Summit right now. And I guess the first question that I have on my mind is whether NATO is now a zombie alliance. Trump's basically said that he may or may not come to the aid of particularly Eastern Europe. So that kind of puts a big question mark above what's going on.
Well, that has been the question. It was the question for 4 years before, and now it's even more of a question. I've personally been arguing that since January 20th, 2025, NATO as an alliance doesn't really function the way it ordinarily would because there's nothing automatic about it. In order to get a decision in order to do something about an attack, the allies have to meet and get consensus.
Yeah.
And then if they get consensus, each country will contribute as much as they feel like. There's no obligation to do anything.
Right.
And so Trump could block it at the first stage, or he could just withdraw the United States from the second stage. The United States is pulling troops out of Europe. It'll still have some, but the credibility of the NATO deterrent was always based on the idea that the Russians, or before them the Soviets, would be killing Americans, and that would then lead to a process by which the United States would get deeply involved, which could possibly lead to nuclear war. And it was all those, well, if this could happen thing was the deterrent, because 1% chance of nuclear war was good enough to dissuade anybody from starting anything stupid.
Right.
But now the question is, with the United States really not committed to defense of Europe, how does Europe defend itself? And so Macron has been going around Europe trying to negotiate bilateral nuclear deals so that way the French could have their weapons stored on some other country's territory, or at least have some sort of relationship so that way if that country's attacked, then they could expect a French response. But it took the United States decades and decades and lots of effort to persuade everybody of this incredible promise that they'd be willing to risk their own destruction in order to prevent the ally from being destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So the alliance itself has been really torn asunder by Trump again and again and again. They may not have annual summits after this year. This is something they probably should have figured out before now, which is every summit's an opportunity for Trump to get angry. He hates traveling. He hates being treated like an equal along with 9 other countries. And so it would have made sense for them just not do this all that often. Last year, I was at the summit. They had a side party next to it.
Yeah.
And we were waiting for the communique. The communique had 5 paragraphs in it. And the fifth paragraph was thanking the Dutch for hosting it. There was almost nothing done. And so the usual function of these summits is to force the allies to agree to all kinds of things. I always say that these summits are like academic conferences, that we professors don't write our paper until we meet a deadline that's real.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing for all these kinds of summits, for all kinds of summits, is that it forces the actors to make the compromises they need and come to agreement. But there's nothing to agree to when Donald Trump's in the room turning it over tables. So it might make sense not to do these things until the U.S. moves on from him.
Yeah, going into this, I believe that Rutte, the Secretary General, was demanding that everyone bring their spending plans to get to the 5%, which is really 3.5%. Do we think that's going to happen?
I think everybody is going to have their, the idea that it only shows up with its homework on the summit is kind of silly because there's a constant flow of information back and forth. But countries are going to make announcements and are going to make commitments, and then the question is whether they follow through on it. For instance, yesterday, our prime minister made a decision or announced a decision that we would be buying up to 12 submarines from the German/Norwegian consortium.
Yeah.
And so that would be a major move towards both us getting more capability, because right now we have essentially 1 or 2 submarines that are mostly broken most of the time, and so we average maybe having a boat in the water 150, 200 days a year, which is not great.
Yeah.
To getting to where if we have 12 submarines, we have at least have 1 submarine in the water in each ocean all the time. So it gives us real capability, but also it's super expensive. So it gets us closer to 2%. It gets us close to 3.5%.
Yeah.
And so we're not hearing other European countries do this stuff because we're self-centered, but they're doing the same thing.
Okay. I guess my other question with this particular summit is Erdogan and Turkey. And Erdogan's in the middle of a crackdown of his political opponent right now. And I guess I just kind of have to wonder what kind of message this is sending to the alliance, but also, I mean, with the presence of Trump, who is now a full-on authoritarian in there, does it matter anymore?
Well, it matters, but countries within NATO have gone back and forth between democracy and authoritarianism without getting kicked out. Namely Turkey and Greece. And the United States now is pretty much an autocracy, although people are in denial about it.
It was Hungary as well.
And Hungary under Orban was quite authoritarian. This is Hungary's first NATO summit where they're no longer trying to poke as many sticks into the wheels of NATO as possible in quite some time. So yes, we have authoritarians there. Trump is already saying he's going to reduce whatever sanctions the United States had against Turkey. Previously, the United States said it wasn't going to sell F-35s to Turkey because Turkey was buying anti-aircraft systems from the Russians. I mean, I think the fun part for this is Carney, because Carney is going from here to Saudi Arabia. So it's not like he's going to be, if he's going to hang out with the Saudis, then hanging out with Erdogan's not going to be all that problematic for him.
Yeah, old Prince Bonesaw.
Yes, the thing is, what people pay attention to in Davos, the Davos statement, forget, was Carney's call for a pragmatic, principled pragmatism or pragmatic principled behavior, which basically means you choose your principles when they're convenient to you and you dump them when they're not, which doesn't make it very principled. And so don't expect Carney to be saying anything about anybody's human rights violations when he's talking to the Turks, when he's talking with the Saudis, or when he's gone off to China. Carney, I'm sorry,
or Qatar. Similar situation there.
Yeah, I mean, this might be unfair, but central bankers don't really care about principles besides, debt and currency and things of that nature. So, I mean, he's also acted domestically in the same kind of way. He's not a left-wing Liberal Party member. He's on the far right of the party, and so don't expect him to be talking about Canada's values when he's hanging out with autocrats. And he's quite willing to hang out with autocrats. Now, in my mind, counting on the Saudis for anything is a dangerous game. They're not the most reliable allies. I used to argue that there's a yearly contest between Pakistan and Serbia for who was the worst American ally. And now that we no longer care about Pakistan because we're no longer in Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia usually wins the day, although I think Bibi Netanyahu has swept the competition the past couple of years.
Yes, 100%. I think the other question mark that's hanging over this particular summit is what's happening in Ukraine right now, and the fact that they have essentially run out of Patriot missiles, and Russia is taking full advantage of that. And I guess what the rest of NATO can possibly do about this.
Well, you portray it one light. A different way to portray it is that Russia is increasingly desperate, and so they're throwing everything they can to try to break Ukraine's will at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Yes, the problem is the Americans also run out of these missiles because the United States has wasted a lot of its advanced ammunition winning that war with Iran. So there's a tremendous waste of ammunition in that war, and there's less for everything. The way things have been working the past few years, particularly under Trump, has been rather than the United States providing Ukraine with lots of stuff, what the United States has been selling Ukraine lots of weapons, funded by, NATO.
Yeah.
Other countries within NATO. So, for instance, our commitment that Carney mentioned, I think today, is not only to give more weapons to Ukraine, but to give them money, both to invest in their domestic arms industry and to buy weapon systems from around the world, but mostly American weapon systems. So the things that could have happened at the summit but didn't was that some members of NATO were trying to get to pledge every pledge like 0.25% GDP as their annual contribution to Ukraine's defense. That didn't go anywhere. Canada was opposed to it. The Germans were opposed to it. Lots of folks were opposed to it. The United States would never sign on to it. That was a bit too tight of a restriction. But there is an $80 billion commitment being bandied about that's going to be announced at the summit today. And that's significant. We're at a moment where the Russians are losing this war. It went from, well, it's kind of whatever, to now the Russians are losing this war. And the question is, how long is it going to take for Putin to recognize that? We'll see.
Yeah.
But we still need to continue to support the Ukrainians. They still need weapon systems to minimize the damage to themselves and to inflict lots of harm on the Russian economy. And
which, given the fact that their reach now extends into Siberia, they seem to be managing pretty well at that.
Yeah, they've been very smart. The Ukrainians have been very smart all along the way. They've innovated. Nothing forces adaptation like desperation.
Yeah.
And they've been adapting really well. And so now their drones can hit deep into Russia. And it's not just willy-nilly. They're being very specific about it. Like, not just hitting the oil refineries, but hitting the specific part of the oil refinery that has the most important, rarest to obtain equipment. So that way they've really choked off Russia's oil. And Russia is an oil exporting country. And so right now you have tremendously long lines for gasoline in Russia, and it's utterly disruptive. The prices of the war is really being brought home, as anybody who's got a car has to spend hours and hours and hours in line to get gas. So the Ukrainians have been, said, well, you want to make us feel the pain of the war by hitting our people. Well, we're not going to kill a lot of Russians, but we're going to make you feel it. And meanwhile, the Russians are losing more than on the battlefield than they're able to recruit these days, and so it's not a winning proposition on the part of the Russians.
Yeah. On the subject of Ukraine, there was talk about a drone agreement with them, and then I didn't hear anything else about it. So I'm wondering if you have any idea what's going on with that.
I don't know what the status of it is at this moment in time, but we've been making drone equipment for the Ukrainians from the outset, and they've been taking that stuff and adapting it in really good ways. I think at the end of this conflict, we keep on extending our training mission. That's one of the other announcements Carney made. Operation Unifier is going to go on to 2029.
Yeah.
At some point, we're going to have to translate Operation Unifier into Ukrainian and have them come here and train us, because they are the experts in fighting Russians, and they are the experts in adapting drones to the modern day battlefield. Yeah. They have the experience, but we can still train them, and we are still training on the basic soldiering stuff, so that way they can focus on the next level stuff. Yeah.
And I have to wonder if that's kind of where the future is going. I mean, there was a question that was kind of put to I'm trying to remember, I read it in the last couple of days, and it's like, well, we're buying 12 submarines, but why not 50 or 100 of these underwater drones? And someone said, maybe why not both? And so I guess I'm just I guess wondering, how this is going to start translating into what we're looking at. I mean, if Ukraine has learned how to prosecute a war or defend itself in a war on the cheaper side, what does that do to NATO spending commitments?
Well, it's all relative. Cheaper drones is still not cheap.
Right. Okay.
They actually cost a fair amount of money. And what Ukraine is teaching us is they also have to be in quantity, which also costs a lot of money. And one of the things is the drones don't operate themselves. They're unpersoned. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that there's not people behind it. There's large teams. Like one single drone will have up to like 100 different people helping to make it work. And so that still means you have to have a significant-sized military.
Okay.
Now the question of I got into an argument with a senior scholar on another podcast recently, because she was arguing we should just skip planes and subs and go straight to UAVs and UUVs, undersea, unstaffed vehicles. And the thing is, the reality is we need both, because each system has advantages that one doesn't have. If you want to, one example of this would be if there was an incoming civilian airliner that has been taken hostage, pointed at a building,
Yeah.
do you want a drone to take it down, or do you want a fighter plane to take it down? And the answer is you want to have a fighter plane because you want to have the ability for that pilot of your fighter plane to communicate with that plane to make sure that you're not just knocking down a plane that might just not be able to communicate for some other reason.
Right.
That's just one example. For undersea warfare, communicating undersea is hard. And so, yes, we could have a ton of drones underwater, but then we'd have to probably be more reliant on AI. And I would not be that secure about that in terms of how reliable that is.
Yeah.
And so you want to have staffed boats underwater that can make the hard decisions, because naval warfare has always been the case where you cannot just command things from 2,000, 4,000, 10,000 kilometers away. The person there is the one who has to make the calls, and that means you have to train up the people and be right, but they have to be there. And so we can delegate a lot to the machines, but I think we've both seen a fair amount of science fiction movies that say that if you delegate everything to machines, bad things happen.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks again for doing this, and we'll chat it again in the not too distant future.
My pleasure, Dan.
All right. Cheers.
And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. It's at journo_Dale on Twitter and journodale_no_ on Bluesky. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.